break down Darnold. We're going to break down the draft, and we're going to talk a little bit about what happened with Justin Fields and Ryan Day and Dan Orlovsky, and talk about how that stuff happens this time of year. And we're going to talk about it with a former college quarterback, Paul Burmeister, my friend from NBC. And Paul, we got a lot to do, but what was your first reaction when you saw the Darnold trade?
I think it's great for Sam. He's somebody that I'm really happy, Peter, that the reports of how well liked he was at USC continued through the locker room there with the Jets. So even though he wasn't real productive, they didn't win a lot of games, he didn't produce the way he was supposed to. I think he came out very well respected and still well liked, and there's reason to still believe. So I'm happy for him. I'm surprised that they got so much in return. I think,
me too.
I forget if it was a conversation with you or Chris Sims, but I thought a 3 was the highest they could possibly expect. And they get a 2 plus a 4 and a 6. So I like the deal for Sam. I did not see it going down in a way where they got so many draft assets in return.
It's interesting, Paul, that Daniel Jeremiah put out a really good tweet yesterday. We're recording this on Tuesday. But Daniel Jeremiah put out a really good tweet, and he basically tried to figure out the point value on the draft trade value chart that all teams use of the compensation that the Jets got. I thought Joe Douglas did very well. He gets basically, depending on where the Panthers pick, and the pick that they send to the Jets in the second round next year, it's going to be somewhere around the 40th or 41st or 42nd pick overall in next year's draft, which to me, I just didn't think they were getting that. And it helps the Panthers, of course, to be trading picks in next year's draft. But you know what, Paul? I've said this all along. There are teams this year that value the draft this year significantly less than they do in a normal year because they just simply don't have the institutional knowledge that they normally have when they're able to scout players throughout the fall, when players play full seasons in the fall, and then they're able to go to their practices in the fall. They have not been on campus, scouts. If a GM loved a player during the season, unless he went and bought a ticket, he couldn't go to the game. And so it's been a weird year. And so I actually think if I were Joe Douglas, I would rather have had the second round pick in 2022 than in 2021. So, I mean, all told, and I agree with you. Look, I'll tell you one very quick story about Sam Darnold. A couple of years ago, I was in their training camp. I think it was 2019. And I spent some time with him after a training camp practice. And he said to me, I listen to your podcasts all the time when you have quarterbacks on. I'll be in the car, I'll listen, or I'll put it on my headphones or whatever. And so he told me that day that he really learned a lot from just listening to other quarterbacks. And I told him that day I was going to go do Drew Brees soon after that. And he said, I'll definitely be listening. And so he was one of those guys who just really always wanted to get better and always really thought of himself as a sponge. Josh McCown, who was his backup there early on, absolutely loved him. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be good that he's going to be able to go to a place where he has, a much better supporting cast. And who knows how Robert Saleh will do or how the assistant coaching staff with the Jets will do. But they obviously have a good head coach in Matt Rule in Carolina. So I think it's about as good a deal for each team as you probably could have hoped for.
I'll tell you one other thing that really comes to my mind, especially right now with Sam Darnold. I've always had it on my mind with him, but I think it really fits right now, Peter. I got to know him at the All-Star game that we do at NBC in San Antonio. There were 6 quarterbacks a year he was there, and I think he was rated number 6, Peter. He was like the last guy in. And right then when I got to know him, I'm like, this is a quarterback who he was playing other sports all through his high school. He wasn't excelling at these quarterback camps and 7-on-7s and getting offers in 8th and ninth grade. He was playing hoops. He comes from a volleyball family on the beach. So I think if you want to look at glass half full here, you can really do it with Sam, because whatever he's going to be as an NFL quarterback, I think is still out there. He's still learning. I mean, he just took up football full time much more recently than a lot of these other quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, who've been treating it like a job since ninth grade. I think the best or the worst of him is still out there because he's still growing a lot.
Yeah, and add to that the fact that he's 23 years old, and there's at least one quarterback in this draft, I forget which one, who's older than Sam Darnold. So, look, I mean, let me just add one thing about where this leaves everybody right now. And look, I think Joe Douglas did a good job in getting what he could for Sam Darnold. And for those who would say, like one of Mel Kiper's points was, hey, it would be smart for them to keep Sam Darnold while they were working on getting Zach Wilson or whoever up to speed. But here is the most interesting thing, I think, from the Jets standpoint. I do not want to enter training camp handing this job to a quarterback who basically a year ago was in a three-way battle for the starting job at Brigham Young. So, and I'm not saying I don't think he should start opening day, Zach Wilson. But what I am saying is there needs to be some investment now, even if they have to trade for one, in a veteran quarterback. As odd as this sounds, maybe even a Teddy Bridgewater type, because Bridgewater is going to be available. But there needs to be somebody who comes in, who is there and who knows his job, and his job is to help Zach Wilson get ready every week. Now, it could be that Teddy Bridgewater wouldn't have the mindset to do that because he still wants to play. But that, to me, is one of the most important things that the Jets are going to need to accomplish. Everybody said, okay, the quarterback thing is fixed. I'm not sure it's fixed. The quarterback situation is now defined because now we know that they're going to take somebody at number 2. But, man, I'd be really hesitant of playing opening Sunday against whoever, traveling to Miami and having Zach Wilson face Brian Flores' defense or whoever they play opening day. I think they still need to do something at the quarterback position.
The name that comes to my mind, Peter, is Alex Smith, because he's still out there. And you can talk about Teddy Bridgewater maybe or maybe not embracing that role. I think Alex would. And he's also the one guy who has on his resume, he did this. He lived this whole example that people throw out. Well, maybe you let the veteran play and let your first round pick sit and learn behind him. That worked in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. So he's done it before. He'd be the guy that I would go after, number 1. And number 2, Peter, I think it's a really interesting example of how two smart buildings do things or have completely different mindsets right now. Zach Wilson looks like he's going to come in and play right away and be the guy, unless they go get somebody like Alex Smith. You have the 49ers, they're going to take a quarterback at 3, and they appear to be comfortable with allowing Jimmy Garoppolo to still be there just in case. Hey, maybe Jimmy catches fire. Maybe he's healthy. Maybe he's motivated. Maybe he's the best guy this year. And we're okay with that. And just it seems like the Jets are going down a much different path with how they're viewing their rookie quarterback's first year.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets are in an awkward position, and I agree with you. I think that Alex Smith is perfect. I plan on stealing that as my theory. But honestly, he is the perfect guy because, look, I'll never forget talking to Pat Mahomes, the former pitcher who's Patrick Mahomes' dad. And he told me, in the middle of Patrick Mahomes' great MVP season, his dad told me that Patrick will never be able to repay Alex Smith for everything he did for him. It's impossible. Andy Reid said Patrick doesn't owe Alex Smith a house. He owes him a mansion. And, so it's clear. And look, Mahomes loves absolutely loves him. You know, the other guy I was thinking of, except he really can't do it for reasons I'll explain. But the other guy I would really love to see on the roster, not necessarily as a player necessarily, but I'd like to see him in the organization, is Josh McCown, because he was an absolutely incredible mentor to Sam Darnold. And look, it didn't show up yet. But I know that Sam Darnold takes away great lessons from working with Josh McCown. You know, the one other thing, and the reason why it wouldn't work now, is that Josh McCown lives about 170 miles outside of Houston. And I believe that at some point in the not too distant future, he's going to have a chance to be a coach on a very smooth pathway to one day being a head coach in the NFL. But over the next couple of years, at least, he really wants to stay home and watch his two sons. One is a senior in college. He now is committed to Colorado to continue playing quarterback in college. And then he's got a junior in high school, a son, who's probably going to be the quarterback at the high school in his senior year, and then could go on. Who knows? But this is one of the things that Josh McCown, basically after making a lot of money to be mostly a backup quarterback in his career, this is one of the things that he wants to do over the next 2 years: watch his sons play high school football. And good for him, he's earned that right. But man, I'll tell you what, he would have been a great mentor to Zach Wilson, but they'll have to find somebody else.
Well, at some point, if it plays out that way, Peter, he's going to be a terrific asset to some young quarterback, using all that experience, plus his desire to help people with that experience he gained. I really enjoyed your article this week when it comes to all the different ways it kind of attacked one of the main stories in the draft season, and that's Justin Fields. And his view, or the support he got from his head coach, was brought up some of the things that maybe mechanically that need some work right now to help him be better in the NFL. And one of the promising young analysts in our business kind of stepping over a line and saying some words he wish he would have done differently. It touched a lot of different things within those few paragraphs. Which part of those are still sticking with you now a couple of days later?
Of Dan Orlovsky. And I think sometimes, Paul, in this business and how it's become, particularly covering the draft now, the draft, I remember last Thursday, I was flipping the channels. It was the first day of the baseball season, so I was watching some baseball. And so it was maybe 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock, and I looked, and here it is, 4 weeks before the draft. And in prime time on ESPN, they have a 1-hour Todd McShay mock draft show. And it's just, I guess everybody loves that stuff. It's just, man, it's hard for me to live it all the time because everybody is just guessing right now and making educated guesses. But man, over and over and over again, it's too much for me. But anyway, my point is that the draft has become an incredible, not just spectacle on the weekend that it happens, but leading up to it, networks and websites are spending tremendous resources and energy and man and woman power to cover it. And it just occurred to me that I think sometimes we can so overanalyze players and prospects. And look, and Paul, you watch, I'm sure you're a regular college football watcher, having played in college and all that, but I don't watch much of it at all. But I did watch Ohio State Clemson in the playoffs this year. And I saw an incredible performance by Justin Fields, and an incredible performance while after taking a gigantic hit from a Clemson linebacker midway through the second quarter. After he took that hit and had to go out to sort of catch his breath and all that, and who knows? I don't know what happened. Did he break ribs? It looked like it to me, but something happened. I mean, that was a car crash of a hit. And after he did that, what did he do? He threw 4 touchdown passes. He beat the greatest college quarterback in the land in Trevor Lawrence, and played fantastic. And when all this stuff started coming out, well, Justin Fields slipping, I'm saying to myself, this is just a case, I think, of people thinking too much, in my opinion. I mean, I think wherever Justin Fields lands, I think is going to be a pretty fortunate team. And as far as what Dan Orlovsky said, I think that one of the problems in our business is we're always trying to pass on the information that we hear and we feel good about. And that's what Dan did. He passed on information from people he trusted that questioned Justin Fields' work ethic. And I would have been okay with that, even though that is not what I found when I asked 2 people in the league. Obviously, his coach, Ryan Day, is going to say great things about him. But the 2 people I talked to over the weekend, both who are going to be in position to take a quarterback, both said they had not heard that, and they are studying the quarterbacks. So I don't know who's right. We'll know in 3 or 4 years. But I think the other point to make with this is, I think where Dan got in a little bit of trouble is when he said, where's his desire to be a great quarterback? Man, here's a guy, as Ryan Day pointed out to me, who circulated a petition among all Big Ten football players to sign after Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, said there wasn't going to be a season. And so the players organized by Justin Fields helped turn that tide. And then if you watch him after getting hit in the Clemson game, to think that he doesn't have the desire or somehow might not love football or might not work at football, hard for me to fathom that. So to me, I look at this and I say, I think Justin Fields, if he goes down, 9, 10, 11, right in that range or wherever he goes, I think teams are going to be getting a good player.
My mind went so many different places when reading. I was reading your article, Peter, and really the 48 hours before when reading about what Dan had said. And if I can kind of just I kind of want to look at it, and I know Dan personally, I think he does a good job, and I think he knows, he wished he would have had those moments back. But just in the abstract, this time of year, and you made mention of this, analysts are on so often, so many outlets saying so many words about these quarterbacks or whatever position. There are times when the analysts, who are really good analysts because of how often they're on, they are either forced to or kind of unknowingly take a step over into the reporter sphere. And being a reporter, you grew up a reporter. You gathered those skills before you came on TV, so you had that skill set. But a lot of these guys are good at watching tape. They have a wonderful eye. They're very comfortable on TV. They communicate their message well. But when they have to be a reporter, that's a different world to them. And you know very well, Peter, there are a lot of places you can step into it as a reporter. You can help build a false narrative. You can burn a source. You can say things that really aren't true, but somebody that you trust said them to you and you put them out there. Being a reporter requires a lot more sorting before you speak, and it requires a lot more being careful about your words than just, I saw this on tape and this is what I think and I know I'm right. Being a reporter is a whole different game. And these guys and women, I mean, depending on what sport you're talking about, they end up over there. And oftentimes it takes a mistake or a few moments where you say words you wish you wouldn't have to learn that lesson.
And I think it's a good lesson for Dan to hear. I think I could tell, and I know Dan some. I wouldn't say I'm close to him, but I know him some. We've talked 10 or 15 times. I think he was really kind of wounded by this and realizes that he has to own the words he spoke, but he realizes, as he said to Justin Fields, he called him and apologized. And he said, I realize that those words are going to stick to you. And that really bothers me. and I'm sorry for that. And look, as I say, I don't think he needs to apologize for two guys in who he has spoken to, saying that they have questions about his work ethic. That to me is, I probably would have used a bit of an appendage on that to say, look, that's not something I know. I'm just telling you what people who are studying these quarterbacks in the NFL believe. And a couple of them who I know said that, he may have some issues with work ethic. And then, but I think where he kind of really got in trouble, as I say, is just saying, where's his desire to be a great quarterback? That to me, it just seems, I'm not saying it's nonsensical, but it just seems to be way over the top.
Yeah. I also had a thought come to mind many years ago when I was working at NFL Network, Peter. We would get to the point of the year where certain part of our team would be covering the playoffs and certain part of the team went to the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl and the Combine. And I was on kind of that draft prep team. And one of the analysts I worked with and liked a lot, he would always grab me and be like, "Hey, Paulie, you ready for lying season? You got your helmet on? Are you ready for lying season?" Because that's what a lot of these personnel people do. And even if they don't want to, even if they wouldn't view it as lying, they knowingly mislead you about what they think, about what they feel about a prospect or a team's needs. And like, to make that point even further, I think it's negative season too for a lot of the people inside the buildings.
Yeah.
They get to the point, like this process, when you talk about first round players and that investment and that money and that position of quarterback, they are doing all this work to find things wrong with the player. And when you get to the third or fourth round, they all want to raise their hand and stand on the table and say, "I love this guy. This is a wonderful investment. I want his success attached to me." But if that first round quarterback's a failure, they want their reports to have said, "Told you. I said this was an issue. I said this might be a problem." And by the time we get to this point of the process, it's so negative because it's built to find the mistakes and turn them out there. And sometimes we can all get caught in that trap and report something that we heard before we think, you know what, this guy's 8 weeks into analyzing this player. He's been told to find the negative on him. I need to keep that in mind.
I'm going to disagree with you slightly on this, but only slightly, because my experience in covering the draft every year, first of all, there are people who do this for a living who talk to 5 times more people than I do. So I don't pretend to be, what I was, say, 20 years ago when I'm covering it every day. I just don't do it as intensely anymore. But I'll tell you what I have done over the years. I've closed my circle, and I've narrowed my circle so that there are, in the next 3 weeks, 15 people who I will make absolutely sure that I talk to. And some of them I'll talk to for 2 hours, because my experience with them over the years is that they're very smart about what some other teams will do. And Paul, the reason I said that I'm going to disagree with you some on this is that, let's just say that the 2 people who, if it was 2 that Dan Orlovsky talked to, said that Justin Fields' work ethic is a problem. Let's just say that one of the teams, that one of those 2 teams drafts Justin Fields. Dan Orlovsky, rightfully so, could go to that person and say, "You lied to me. Why did you mislead me on Justin Fields?" And so, like, I would never talk to that person again. I wouldn't, because now I've seen that he's using me to get out some narrative. And if I thought anybody I was talking to was doing that, I wouldn't talk to him anymore. And there have been people who I just don't talk to anymore because, honestly, I don't trust them. Mm-hmm. And so, but anyway, I've got this circle now, 12 to 15 people who in the next 3 weeks I will spend a lot of time on the phone with. going from 1 to 32 of the draft, trying to figure things out so that I can write something that might be representative of what's going to happen. And so if any of those people over the years I felt had told me something just to send me on some trail, I would not have done it. And so I wouldn't talk to him anymore. And
Right.
so there are times when I feel like I absolutely know who the player a team is going to take. I specifically will not ask the general manager because, first of all, he's not going to tell me. And no matter how close to him I am, he's not going to tell me because it's not in his best interest to spill the beans before the draft. But I just really try to find out what teams are going to do. And then when I have a good idea of what they're going to do, and I definitely don't need to talk to that team, I won't, because I don't want to give that guy an opportunity to try to talk me out of it.
Right. And you've worked yourself in that position where, as you described it, your world has shrunk this way, and you just have football conversations with people that you trust, and they trust how you're going to use the information. And you kind of use it. I'm sensing like you're already down this path of you feel good, you know a roster, you know what a team might need, and hearing their words inside the building just allows you to go down that path with conviction. You're not reporting, hey, they told me this. You're just
Right.
using it for your own confidence. And that is position A. That's where you want to be. And I remember that the year Johnny Manziel was coming out, Peter, I was at a function, and the general manager, who I kind of knew, was friendly with, but wouldn't put him in that circle as you described, someone who I really trusted them. He really trusted me. But we ended up in a conversation, and I was convinced that they needed a quarterback and they liked Johnny Manziel the best. I didn't say this GM told me this, or I didn't report it, but
Yeah.
as I got ready for the draft, I used that information internally for me. I thought I was down this path with confidence, and they went a completely different direction. They hated Johnny Manziel. And I saw that again later, and I kind of high-fived him. I mean, I wasn't upset that he kind of misled me. I think he was doing his job. He threw me off a scent, put me in another way, and it was gamesmanship. And I'm still friends with that person, but I totally get what you're saying. You kind of live and learn. And if you have that small circle of people that you know you can have a football conversation with because they trust you, that's right where you want to be. You don't end up on the periphery with someone that I think I could trust him, and then you end up getting burned.
Yeah. The last thing I would say about all this stuff is that, something has happened in our business, and I wrote a little bit about this recently, but something's happened in our business that if you get hired, you're expected, and this is overstating it, but you're expected to be an expert on what you do. So, if you get hired to cover the draft for ESPN or to do the draft for any big website or whatever it is, it's almost like you're expected to know things that you really can't necessarily know. And I think that's where a lot of people in our business kind of get in trouble. We're not experts. We may know more than the general public. I hope we do, but we're really not the experts that the general managers who do this for a living are. And look, maybe they're good at their jobs, maybe they aren't, but they know more than we do. And I think sometimes the general public, I've found, doesn't want to hear that. They just want to know everything that we know. Like in my column this week, and I wrote in my column, I have no idea what the Carolina Panthers are going to do at quarterback. And 15 hours later, they trade for Sam Darnold. So good for them that they kept it quiet. And a couple of people wrote to me. Somebody wrote me an email and said, "Man, you're really plugged in." And I'll probably answer the email in my column, but in essence, I'm not altogether plugged in because, quite honestly, the New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers didn't want anybody to be plugged in until after this deal went down.
Yep. And kudos to you for just, saying where you were with all of it. And this to amplify what you're saying, this time of year is so much more difficult than the season, because the season, there's a game every 7 days that you can talk about. All the fans saw what we saw. We can have our own interpretation, our own analysis and reaction. Right now, we're not sitting in the draft meetings once a week and walking out and saying, what did you see? Well, here's what I saw. I mean, we're all kind of guessing. And, with our own knowledge of being around it for a number of years and the people that we do get to talk to and trust, hopefully we have some insight. But you're exactly right. We're kind of all guessing. And then in the rare instance, Peter, where a GM so well, where, like you talked about, what they're going to do, you're not going to let everybody know that you know that. You're going to say they're going to take somebody else because you don't want to burn that source. So it's an interesting, difficult spot to be in terms of what kind of information you have and what you can put out there.
Hey, look, there's sometimes in a mock draft where I will never knowingly. The only time I ever knowingly put somebody to a team that, and I really don't think it's going to happen, is because I need to get rid of a guy who I know is going in the first round, and I have no idea what that particular team is going to do. So I give him that guy. And then, of course, you look foolish, but I'd look a lot more foolish throwing a dart and then keeping a guy who I feel strongly is going to be in the first round out of the first round. So, sometimes things, and sometimes there's a reason why you do things. But anyway, it's just we're getting into that part of the season
right.
Where I won't not my favorite of the season. I'll just tell you that much. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Paul, listen, thank you so much for your insight and for batting it around a little bit.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.